I'm Simeone Scaramozzino, and I'm the leader of the Milan chapter of Transformative Technology, a global community of like-minded and like-hearted scientists, entrepreneurs, innovators, practitioners who leverage technology to create the future of work and society. I'd like to pull up a few slides for those of you who are not familiar with what we do. We really sit at the intersection of neuroscience, psychology, technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And we leverage tech, exponential technologies of the likes of artificial intelligence, VR, AR, and XR, all the immersive technology and networks and sensors and biotechnology and neurofeedback and robotics and really more, because we have in mind the creation of well-being at scale. Why is well-being, especially in such a moment, so important? It's because when humans are in a state of well-being, they can only from there imagine a new model for society and work. It's only from that state of flourishing that we can imagine a future, and we can also take healthy risks to advance society. Because we really build who we are and what we are, and we want to build tech that's more humane. We don't believe in tech that separates us. We rather believe in tech that can heal the fragmentation and create new forms of community. We want to respond to one big problem. How can we let humans express their full potential? How can we work on their cognitive and emotional abilities for them to even begin to imagine a new model for society? Because we believe that nothing changes until the mind changes, because whatever can be imagined can then be brought to fruition. And this is how we can build the future of work and society. The future of tech itself depends on the state of our minds, because we can only build what we are. We can also believe we can build what we are together. Only after we ascertain who we really are, we can begin to imagine who we really can be together. And how, in this beautiful picture, in the murmuring of such beautiful beings, we can all thrive together and individually towards a global and shared goal. We have a big goal in mind. We have 1 billion people to be brought in a state of flourishing by 2030 and 2 billion people by 2050. This is not a random number. This is a number based on a study that defines how if 25% of the population can imagine a revolution, or can start and imagine a revolution, there's a trickle-down effect whereby everyone will follow. Because that things cannot be done alone, we created an ecosystem. At the moment, we are in 80 countries around the world and 500 cities. And we created a brand that is a nexus for transformative technology, for both the academic, the industry, and the public sectors. We created a conference that happens annually in Palo Alto. We have a TransTech lab. We do publish industry research. We have TransTech 200, an index that puts together all the innovators and the companies that work in the field. We have the different chapters that are scattered around the world. And we have the Academy, the first and most important virtual accelerator for startups that work in the field. 12 major areas of technology we work on. And today, we're going to focus on what we could define sleep tech, but more largely circadian tech. Circadian rhythm is such a fascinating clock that sits within us. It's in a suprachiasmatic nuclei of our brain, closer to the hypothalamus. And it orchestrates our biological strategies to anticipate the changes in the environment. We know this since year 700, when a French man, specifically an astronomer, realized that mimosa leaves would open with the light and close in the absence of it. But they will continue to replicate their behavior even in absence of light. But it was only until 1970 when two scientists wondered about the behavior of fruit flies who had their circadian rhythm shut down. And they were wondering what was the mysterious gene that created that malfunction. And only until 2017, we finally realized what that gene was. But to answer such question, we have two world-renowned experts today, phenomenal guests that are going to tell us everything about the circadian rhythm and how to use it to our own advantage. Dr. Steve Lockley and Mickey Beyer-Clausen, welcome. I'd like to introduce yourselves first.
Hello, thank you. My name is Steve Lockley, and I'm a neuroscientist at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston and an associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. And I've been studying circadian rhythms in humans for about 25 years now, including what happens to blind people who don't get that light signal that we just heard about for the plants, to try and understand the importance of light in resetting our biological clocks. And then more recently, we've been applying that knowledge and that technology to a range of different settings and occupations to try and help people, for example, with shift working and with Timeshifter that you'll hear about, to try and help people with jet lag. And so I do a range of basic and real world experiments funded by NIH, NASA, and others to try and understand how we can change the clock in humans to help with health and well-being.
My name is Mickey Beyer-Clausen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Timeshifter that Dr. Lockley just mentioned is one of those tools that could be used to address jet lag based on the sleep and circadian neuroscience we'll talk about today. And before that, I have been involved in a handful of other technology companies and startups. So I come from the technology side, but I was lucky enough to meet Dr. Lockley and was able to put some products out there that in fact are utilizing what we know about circadian, the circadian clock and rhythm to help people.
Mickey, what have we gotten wrong about jet lag? Why are we so plagued with it? And why haven't we found a solution yet after so many years that we've known about it?
Right. So, why don't I share a couple of slides with you that might help a little bit, make it a little bit more visual. Can you see the slides?
Yes, I can. I don't know if everybody else can.
Beautiful. Well, I'm sure this conversation is not going to be all about jet lag, but also some of the other implications of the circadian clock that are so profound in our health and well-being and performance. But to kick things off, I think jet lag is such a specific area.
Excuse me, Mickey, we're not seeing the screen. Yeah, it came, but then it went.
All right. So
we can see that.
Unfortunately, I think it won't allow me to show you the full screen. Maybe this is okay?
Okay, can everyone see?
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, all right.
All right, so I think jet lag is such a fun, specific area. When you talk about circadian neuroscience and what you can do with it, I think many people are not completely aware of what's going on, what causes jet lag, and how to address it. But first, look at some of these implications as it relates to jet lag, of course, for shift workers and other instances that Dr. Lockley can talk much more about during this conversation. There are other consequences, but here you see some significant financial and human cost of jet lag, right? The obvious one, reduced productivity and lower performance. If you're an athlete, compromised safety, you're driving in a rental car in a new country and you're fatigued and tired and jet lagged, not a good idea. Less enjoyment. If you're on vacation, the first day or two is gonna, if not more, might be compromised because of that. And they also have some that some people might not realize as much, and that is the fact that you are leaving a little bit earlier. Many people leave earlier to be a little bit more reset to the new time zone when they have to either be in an important business meeting or have something important going on at the destination. You have the recovery time when you get home, whether that's during the week where you come back to work and are not, productive and fatigued, or whether that's a Friday afternoon and you come back to your family and your spouse that expects you to be part of the chores and have fun with the kids and some quality time, and you might just be a zombie on the couch. That's not a great situation either. And then you have, which I think is more relevant now than maybe ever, the weakened immune system, where of course the more you stabilize your circadian rhythm, the more strong your immune system is and are able to fight the diseases and problems out there. But you also have the long-term health implications that include certain cancers, diabetes, etc. that, again, Dr. Lockley can go much more into depth with. So there's a whole bunch of consequences here. And yet we are, as you mentioned, we're doing everything wrong. You know, we have been, it's not all because of, it's not our own faults, I would say. I think there's a lot of noise out there. You know, there are lots of people that claim to know how to deal with jet lag, and it's publicized broadly in the media. Do this, do that, but with little connection to science. You also have lots of products out there. You know, the funniest one I saw just before the coronavirus, the COVID-19 happened, and one of the last time I traveled before then, was a jet lag lotion you could buy in the airport. And you know, I'm sure Dr. Lockley can have a fun conversation about what claims are correct or not around that, but it certainly is not something that's going to help you with shifting the circadian clock or resetting it to the new time zone. I think this picture here illustrates what most of us do, which is just give up and accept jet lag as part of travel. And this is where I think things become interesting, because there actually is something that you can do proactively. But to answer your question before about, you know, what, why haven't we cured it yet? I think, you know, I agree. It puzzles me, the fact that we have recyclable rockets, and here later today we have a new SpaceX going up with 2 astronauts. We have autonomous cars, but we haven't cured jet lag, which has been around since the jet age began. Why is that? Well, a couple of reasons that I think, to simplify the answer. One is the science weren't there for that long. It hasn't been around for that long. The other one is we needed a vehicle that could mass deliver personalized advice, because jet lag is not a generic, there's no generic answer to how to solve jet lag and tackle the underlying cause of jet lag. It is very personal. It depends on sleep pattern, chronotype, and itinerary, and other stuff that Dr. Lockley can go into depth with. And then lastly, I feel like with any other emerging area, you need somebody credible to sort of move it out there and show that it works, and create credibility around it when there's been so many persistent misconceptions around it. If somebody that are known and you can relate to us saying this works, you're going to move the area much quicker. And the exciting thing with this area is that both NASA and Formula One, as shown here, are 2 institutions that have done a lot to apply the science. And I think that's, you know, my quick answer to your question.
Thank you. So more introspection, more credibility in the sources. But talking about sources, Steve, what is circadian rhythm and what isn't?
Right, so we have, as you said at the start, a clock in the brain, and it's in the hypothalamus, which in this slide is marked by that dark blue area. And we know, we've known about this clock for about 40 years or so, 50 years. And if you take this bit of the brain out of an animal, it loses its rhythms. And so we know that this is the site of this core circadian meaning 24 hours, our circadian clock. And in fact, we know now that each of those cells is a clock. There are about 50,000 cells in the suprachiasmatic nucleus that you mentioned earlier. And each of those cells is its own clock. And so if you isolate a single cell, or you measure it in the brain or in a petri dish, each cell is an oscillator. And what's really unusual about these cells is that they are self-sustained clocks. By that I mean they don't need anything from the outside to generate a 24-hour rhythm. Wow. And so there is a set of about 10 or 12 core clock genes that generate a 24-hour, near 24-hour rhythm each and every day, And then this part of the brain sends signals to other parts of the brain and other parts of the body to control the rhythms of things that we all know to have about a 24-hour pattern. And so common ones include things like sleep, your mood, your alertness, your performance, temperature, heart function, lung function, and more increasingly we understand that really all of our metabolic processes are affected by the clock. We showed a few years ago that your immune function is circadianly regulated. The components of immune response change by time of day. Your metabolism changes by time of day, which is why you get more heartburn if you eat at 2 in the morning compared to 2 in the afternoon. Your reproductive hormones cycle over a 24-hour day. And so really this clock is the master conductor of the orchestra of all of our rhythms across the body. And we have one in order to make sure that everything is aligned. And you mentioned at the start the idea that we're probably synchronized to anticipate tomorrow. And that's really why we have a clock, so that we can be awake at the right time, sleep at the right time, find a mate or find food at the right time. But we also need to make sure that all of our internal processes are aligned. And so when you eat, you want your stomach clock to be aligned with your pancreas, to be aligned with your liver, to be aligned with your kidneys, because you want those internal processes to be aligned as well. And so this clock really orchestrates the time that our physiology happens, both making sure it occurs at the right time with the outside world, and also making sure that all of our internal rhythms are synchronized. And as you mentioned, again, light is the key component. So light is the strongest environmental time cue that resets our clocks. That light is detected only by the eyes. And so it is light into the eyes which affects our clock in the brain. And the daily pattern of that light-dark cycle is what the clock resets to. And you don't have to do anything. If you just live in a normal 24-hour light-dark cycle, your clock will detect the light through the eyes and reset itself properly. But we start to get problems when we mess with that light pattern. So if you stay up all night as a shift worker, or if you fly to Japan and essentially reverse your day-night cycle, you've moved the light-dark cycle too quickly for your clock to keep up with. And it takes, on average, if you don't do anything special, about 45 minutes to an hour a day to shift, which means if you go to Japan, and that might be a 9 or a 10-hour shift, depending on the time of year, that will take you at least 9 or 10 days to adapt to. And then if you adapt to Japanese time and come back, it'll take you another 9 to 10 days to get back onto home time. And so jet lag is caused by the fact that we shift our cycles, our sleep, wake, and behavior too quickly for the clock to keep up with. We take that 24-hour light dark cycle and mess it up so our clocks can't keep up. And then we need to gradually reset ourselves to that new time zone, again, through exposure to light and light avoidance. And both of those are important. And so any jet lag solution has to have light as its central plank, because the only way to shift the clock is through light and the use of melatonin, which we also include in our program. And they're the only two things that have really any substantial effect on the clock. But you can also get it wrong, because the timing of light or the timing of melatonin matters. Depending on the time of day you see light or the time of day you would take melatonin, you can shift the clock earlier or later. And so if you do things at the wrong time, you can shift your clock in the wrong direction and make jet lag worse. And so it isn't really just a matter of popping a pill when you want to go to sleep, or getting on the new time zone when you land in Paris and go out into the sunshine. That might in fact send your clock the wrong way and do damage for your jet lag. And so there are physiological bases, there's the strong neuroscience understanding how we can reset our clocks with light and melatonin. And what we've done with Timeshifter is take that science and put it into a usable app that will just tell you what to do at the right time to shift your clock much more quickly than you would naturally.
Thank you. So what you say seems to screen personalization. Like we can't address this issue unless we look at the different types that might be seen out there, or by looking specifically at our needs. I was very fascinated by what you said, and I want to create this ping pong between the two of you here when we spoke about chronotypes. Because there's sort of, let me say, false literature out there. I'm just curious about this.
So one of the things that determines your sleep-wake patterns is the timing of your internal clock. And we all have a slightly different clock. If we measure, doing a specialized laboratory protocol, we measure your internal clocks. It ranges from around 23 and a half to around 25 hours. The average is around 24.2. And so some of us have a clock which cycles quicker, say someone with a 23.8 hour clock, and they tend to be more morning type. They have a faster cycle in their molecular mechanism. They wake up earlier, feel better earlier, and do better earlier in the day. Whereas some of us have a longer period, a longer clock, which may be 24 and a half or 25 hours, and those people tend to be more evening type. They tend to get up later, feel better later in the day, feel more alert later in the day. And so that morningness, eveningness, or chronotype, or diurnal preference, these are all the same words to describe the same thing. That's an expression of what your internal clock is and where you line up in the world. So if all of us here went and lived in the same place with the same light-dark cycle, some of us would wake up earlier, some of us would wake up later, and that would be an expression of our internal circadian clock in the brain. And so your morningness, eveningness, your whether you're an owl or a lark, tells us something about your internal clock. And why that matters is it also determines how easy it is for you to reset your clock. If you are someone who has a quicker clock and a more morning type, you tend to find it easier to travel east because your clock is sort of traveling a bit east every day. It's getting earlier, which is what you have to do when you travel east. Whereas people who have a longer clock and a more evening type, their clocks are naturally going a little bit west every day. And so evening types find it easier to travel west. Now, when we survey people and measure people's clocks, we find about 3/4 of people tend to be over 24 in their clock, and so tend to find it easier to travel west. But about 1/4 of people tend to find it easier to travel east. And so if we're providing you with jet lag information, first of all, we need to know, are you more a morning type or an evening type or neither? And so from that, we can change the rate of adaptation depending on the direction of shift. And this matters. For example, we do this in Timeshifter. If you travel from one part of the planet to the other side, there might be an 11-hour shift or a 12-hour shift or a 14-hour shift. But of course, 11 hours one way is 13 hours the other to get to the same place. And so we can actually send your clock in the opposite direction to the plane if that's best for your adaptation. And so when we give you the plan, and there's more than 500 different options of every plan that we develop, we want to know when you're leaving, what time of day, what direction, whether you're a morning or an evening type, and then other things like your sleep pattern, your sleep timing, because that makes a difference, whether you want to use caffeine or melatonin, and we'll come to that a little later. But we personalize it to you because we want to shift your clock in the direction which is easiest for you to travel, which might be the complete opposite of the way the plane's going. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the plane's doing. We're shifting the clock in your brain. And so morningness, eveningness is one of the tools we use to help shift you specifically in the right direction.
Wonderful, wonderful. Mickey, Steve is basically talking about chronotypes, and that in my mind creates the idea of personalizations in nutrition and medicine, so chrono medicine and chrono nutrition. And how relevant is the current app or what your company is doing in addressing these latent needs of society?
Also, I think great question. I think we started with jet lag because of we felt it was an interesting problem. People recognize the pain point that jet lag causes, at least to some extent. And we know where all the travelers are. It's easy to partner with, companies in the travel industry to bring it to millions of people and get them the help that they need. But it's also a platform for further development and to address other problems later, including things like shift work, et cetera, where all the data and all the experiences we now have in applying the science on a real problem and collecting data around what works and what doesn't work, and fine-tuning the algorithm and the experience so that it becomes as easy and intuitive as possible. I'll just give you a couple of examples of things that have been applied in order for the solution to work in real life. Because it's not enough to take the science as is. You also need to take into consideration what reality allows for people to comply with, right? So, you know, for instance, as we can talk about a little bit, some of the specific advice in this first app that we've created, there are things like, you know, when to see light, when to avoid light, you know, when to go to sleep, and I'll show that a little bit later if you want. But we cannot ask people to go to sleep when they arrive to Hong Kong airport, right? Because they need to get their luggage, they need to get into a cab, they need to go to a hotel, check in, you know, unpack, get their toothbrush, brush their teeth, go to bed. So in other words, we need to add a level of practicality filters on top of the science to say what's possible, and then count that into the remaining advice that we offer people and say they couldn't do what we really wanted to do at that specific moment. So this is how it affects the plan, and therefore this is what they need to do going forward. So there's a lot of complexity in this. This is not straightforward. And one thing that Stephen Lockley you know, didn't mention a little bit earlier about although he was alluding to it around some of this advice, it is not intuitive. It is not intuitive. Many have the, there are some people we talk to that say, well, I go to bed a little bit early or a little bit later before my trip, and that way I'm adjusting to the new time zone. Well, since light is the key time cue for the circadian clock, it's really not just about going to bed, although that does impact you, because the moment you go to bed, you close your eyes, and that means you're avoiding light. So you are time shifting or moving your circadian rhythm in either one or another direction when you sleep, which is important. But when to see light is not intuitive. There will be a morning when many people on the destination, they will go out in the sun in the morning thinking that I need sunlight, I need to see the sun, like I need to be outside because now that will help me adopt. In fact, it could be that you needed to avoid light for an hour or two in the morning on your destination time zone, and that's not intuitive. So, so anyway, we as a company, Jetlag is our first product. The Timeshifter Jetlag app is the first product, but we have ambitions to help people in many other areas or in several other areas where the mistiming of the circadian clock has become a problem. So now we have a foundation, both the scientific foundation, but also how do you convert the science into a user-friendly product that people actually enjoy using and benefit from using. That's a whole different beast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to add a little bit of that, to talk a little bit about where the future is going with circadian medicine, circadian science. We haven't had it hasn't been very easy to measure the clock until fairly recently in humans. So you can do it in the lab, you can do it if you have access to people a lot of time, but that's really been a barrier to this being used more widely across medicine, for example. And so there are some new techniques where people are able to now estimate your internal time from potentially a single blood sample, a finger prick, for example, or a saliva sample, or even a urine sample. And some of these technologies are emerging where we can much more easily measure your clock in real time. And when we do that, we're going to find that everything will depend on time. At the moment, we know some of the things that do, but we can't really do that in a very practical way. And so, for example, when you have a blood test at the doctor's office, you and I might be 5 hours different in our biological time, but we both do an 8 a.m. fasting blood sample. But in my body, it might be 5 a.m. In your body, it might be 10 a.m. Yet we're still tested in the same way and interpreted in the same way. If we get given a medication, we're both told to take it 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., even though our clocks might be very different. And so when we are able to measure the clock or model the clock as we do with Timeshifter, where your circadian clock is every day, all the things that the clock affects can now be timed appropriately. And that then also extends to nutrition, as you talked about, chrononutrition. A lot of the restricted feeding claims at the moment aren't really anything to do with restricted feeding. They're really just eating in the day, which is what we should do as humans, as a diurnal animal. And so your circadian system is geared up to metabolize food in the day. We are not geared up to metabolize food at night. And so it's pretty sensible to have your calories in the daytime. And that's really just a clock doing its normal thing. It's not necessarily some new big discovery about nutrition. But so chronodiagnostics, chronotherapeutics, these are going to become the future, because circadian medicine will be included in all medicine, because it cuts across everything we do, as well as your social lives. When should I exercise? When should I eat? What should I eat? Et cetera, et cetera. We're at the start of a real revolution in circadian biology, and this platform is going to help us provide products to address many of these needs.
Just to add a note to what Steve said here, that I think is interesting, and many people, this is one of the misconceptions around how to address jet lag, or maybe even some of the other problems in other areas like shift work. But many believe that exercise and special diets will help you with jet lag, and this is one myth we'd love to just
debunk.
Yeah, exactly, because as Dr. Lockley just mentioned, when to eat and when to exercise, that's important, but it doesn't really impact the circadian clock in our brain very much. So one thing is how our bodies is able to cope, and the metabolism is able to cope with food, and how your body is able to cope with you exercising is a problem. But it doesn't help you address jet lag. That's just important. But let's take an example with exercise that I hear often. Many, when they travel, when they go far away, they still do their 7 a.m. Gym session in the morning. And number one, that won't help you with jet lag. Number two, if your circadian clock in the brain is still on your home time zone, which can be at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever, then is that a good, appropriate time for you to exercise? Is your body ready to exercise? No, it's not. So the timing of these things still matter tremendously. We just need to make sure that we understand what implications it does have. It does not help with jet lag or make it worse, but it will have an impact on your body.
Well, great. I have a question that is valid for both of you. It's slightly complex, but what is the role of education in marketing the product, the Timeshifter? And for you, Stephen, how this specific education about melatonin and caffeine becomes relevant? Because those seem to be two very potent and very spoken of substances that we use on a daily basis.
No, education is key. And of course, that comes from the science, and scientists have to communicate their science well in order for it to be useful. And that is education. And so we have, through Timeshifter, tried to create some excellent graphics and explanations of the science underlying Timeshifter that is available in an accessible way. It's still the right science, it's still complex, but I think we've presented some of that information well. And it is about debunking some of the myths that we've mentioned, but with the real science to back it up. And so if you go to the website, you'll find some of the scientific papers that we've used to support some of the claims around how things affect the clock. And then when people talk about other claims, for example, like exercise or food shifting the clock substantially, we know that's not true. I can show the papers that prove that, and really debunk some of the easy solutions out there. There's the only way to reset the only way to treat jet lag is to reset the clock. The only way to reset the clock is through light or dark and melatonin. Nothing else has been ever shown to reset the clock substantially. And the reason I know that for food and exercise is I've spent 25 years studying totally blind people whose clocks are unable to synchronize to the 24-hour day, even though they have very strict and stringent 24-hour time cues around eating and exercise. And so if these were very powerful time cues that could replace light, then totally blind people wouldn't have a problem with circadian disorders, but they do. The majority of them do. They have non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder because light from the eyes doesn't get to the brain to reset the clock every day. And so people make a lot of claims without really understanding the science, but we're trying to cut through that with good education, clear explanations, and so the app will have a lot of background information if you want to dig a little bit deeper with the science, and so people know this is really based in circadian neuroscience. This is not just a fad or based on theory. There's real practical information. Just quickly, you mentioned melatonin and caffeine. Melatonin helps us in a couple of ways. It does shift the clock, and so if you take it at the right time, it can help shift you earlier or later. But it's also what's been termed a soporific. So melatonin isn't a sleeping pill in a traditional sense. It's not a hypnotic. It will not knock you out like many of the sleeping pills will. But what it will do is help you sleep at the wrong time. And what I mean by that is if you're a shift worker working at night and you want to sleep in the day, melatonin will help you sleep in the day. It will kid the brain into thinking it's nighttime because melatonin is only produced at night in the brain. It's the hormone of darkness, actually, not a hormone of sleep. And so if you take melatonin in the daytime as a shift worker, you'll improve your sleep. Or if you fly to Japan and on the first night in Japan, sleeping really out of sync there, then it'll help you sleep there. So melatonin is not a sleeping pill, but it will help adjust your clock. And caffeine does not affect the clock. We've again shown that in blind people. But it is important to be awake at the right time to see light. And so if you choose to use caffeine from the selections in the app, we time the caffeine to maximize wakefulness when you need to be productive, but also to maximize when you can expose yourself to light through the eyes, because you need to be awake to do that. But we time it in a way that it minimizes then the negative effect on sleep, because caffeine is a strong stimulant. It will affect your sleep for many hours after you take it. And so we minimize that impact while giving you the benefits early in the day. So melatonin and caffeine are good additions to our overall model. They're not the primary one. Light is the primary plank. But if you use caffeine and melatonin wisely and at the right time and in the right doses, it can help assist with the adaptation.
Thank you.
Just again a little note here. Steve mentioned it's an addition. It's very important to say that melatonin standalone might not be that effective. You might take the wrong type and wrong dosage at the wrong time, and then you're not in a good position to benefit from it. So that all of that is important, but also the underlying timing of light is really the foundation, and so that's what your priority should be. That's the focus for shifting the clock reliably, quickly to either a new time zone or to some other goal that you have, shift work or new schedule, whatever it is. So I know I used melatonin before I met Dr. Lockley, and of course I used a way too high dosage. I used the wrong type. I used slow release instead of quick release, and I did not time lighting well. And that's why the only benefit that I really felt was it made me a little bit drowsy. Okay. And not everybody acts the same way when they take melatonin, but I benefited from being a little drowsy, which I guess helped me to some degree, but it didn't really shift me quickly to that new time zone. So I would still struggle for days to get into that new time zone.
Okay.
So it's just an addition.
Thank you. I want to make an exception to the initial format because I think some of the questions that I see in the chat can help, get the conversation going further. So I have a question from Alison. If our chronotype isn't perfectly synced with the 24-hour sun cycle, are we experiencing mini jet lags every day?
We are. That's a great question, and we are. So your clock needs to be reset each and every day to the 24-hour light-dark cycle. And so across a population, as I said, some people might be as early as 23.5, some people might be as long as 25, but we're all somewhere in that continuum. And so we all have, to a greater or lesser extent, a shift needed every day. So if you're someone with a 23.5-hour clock, you need to be delayed by half an hour in order to get to 24, whereas if you are someone with a 24.5-hour clock, you need to be advanced by half an hour every day to stick to the 24-hour time. But your clock does it naturally if you live in a 24-hour light-dark cycle. So you don't have to go right at 7 a.m., I've got to go outside and get my light pulse to shift my clock. If you live in a 24-hour light-dark cycle, which is what we evolved in, then your clock will naturally find its right position. And that's what causes whether you're a morning type or an evening type. So where you line up in the world is dependent on the interaction between your internal clock in the brain and the outdoor natural light-dark cycle. Now, we all mess with that a little bit by using electric light. So we use light in the evening, and in fact, evening light shifts us later. And so all of us are probably shifted a little bit later than we would have been in the natural world. Remember, midnight used to be the middle of the night when we live on a natural light-dark cycle. But of course, midnight is not even bedtime for many of us now with electric light. And so we all are shifted slightly later than we probably should be, but we still have that range across individuals. So yes, we get a little bit of jet lag every day. We adjust every day, and you really take for granted what you're doing. So if we go back to the blind people who I study, if you are totally blind, have no light perception at the eyes or no eyes, then your clock can't synchronize every day, and it runs on its own internal time. So if you're someone who has a clock of 24.5 hours and are totally blind, your brain sends you to sleep half an hour later every day for the rest of your life. And that's in fact much worse than jet lag, because that never ends. And so that mini jet lag continues. So it's fine for a few days. You can go to bed at 10 tonight, 10:30 tomorrow, 11, 11:30, midnight. But after 24 days, you want to go to bed at 10 a.m. And sleep for 8 hours. And so that's the struggle that many totally blind people experience. Now, we can help them when we use melatonin, or more recently a melatonin analog that's been approved for that treatment. You've probably seen some of the adverts on TV for non-24. That's the disorder that blind people get. And so melatonin or melatonin analogs can be used to provide that substitute time cue for blind people to reset the clock in each and every day that you take for granted with light. And so if you were to lose your eyes tonight, or to live in a cave without light, you would start to drift on your own internal clock from tomorrow. And so light is absolutely key to keeping all of our rhythms in sync. But when we mess with it, like with jet lag, then we get problems because our clocks can't adjust quickly unless we do something more special.
And also, you could say one of the things I think most people know today is the interference of using a smartphone or a tablet device in bed, which is sending that time cue, that light time cue to the brain saying it's day, and your body then becomes ready to function and perform. And so the light screwing with that cycle is problematic day to day. And the advice there would be as consistent as absolutely possible with light and dark cues. If you're up in the night or later at night, maybe have the light dimmed at the same time every day would help the circadian clock sort of reset itself without going in an extreme or shift to a wrong time.
Great. Manuel is asking how you determine your personal chronotype.
Yeah, so a couple of people have asked that, I see. So the easiest thing is a questionnaire. So there's a very simple questionnaire which has about 19 questions, which asks you about your preferences for what you prefer to do at different times of day. But it works really not much better than just a straightforward question. Are you an extreme morning type, an extreme evening type, a slight morning or a slight evening type, or neither? And that simple assessment of yourself will tell you to a reasonable way where you are in the world. If you're a morning person, if you like to get up early and feel well and do your best work in the morning, then you're a morning type. If you're someone who likes to stay up later and works well in the evening and likes to sleep in the morning, then you're more of an evening type. And of course, it's a continuum. There are very extreme morning or evening types, and there are people who are less extreme. And then you might be in the middle, and that's okay as well. You might just be someone who does well, your best work in the middle of the day. So at a simple level, a questionnaire like that is really good enough. For us to really measure it, we'd have to either measure your melatonin rhythms in urine in the real world, and we do that routinely. So we can measure your internal melatonin rhythm, which will tell me where your clock is, or we can bring you into a lab for a couple of days and measure temperature or the hormones and so on. So it would take about 2 days to do it if we did it in the real world with urine samples. But the questionnaire is pretty good at giving you a clue. And you'll also know from your own jet lag experience, if you find it harder to travel east, you're more likely to be a morning type. If you find it, if you find it easier to travel east, you're a morning type. If you find it easier to travel west, then you are an evening type. And so your own experience with jet lag will also give you a clue to where you are.
Great, great. Again, Alison is asking, how can you shift your circadian clock using the app? How fast can you do
so
that?
I should have said that earlier. So I mentioned if you don't do anything special, the rule of thumb is you may shift by up to an hour a day. With Timeshifter, you're shifting probably somewhere around 3 hours a day. And so we're shifting your clock about 3 times quicker than you would if you did it yourself. And that's for a number of reasons. Partly because often people do the wrong thing at the wrong time. So they shift themselves the wrong way and then make their jet lag longer. Or they will use caffeine at the wrong time, or melatonin or sleeping pills and other things at the wrong time, which stretch out the problem. So we shift you about 3 hours a day, and you can choose to start shifting before you leave by choosing the pre-adaptation option, which won't shift you 3 hours a day before you leave, because you'd have to be hard to do that, going back to the practicality. But we start to move you in the right direction for a couple of days before you go. So your jet lag problems will be reduced when you arrive at the destination.
So you can say that, you're saying that shift work people can use the app to address their mini jet lags, right?
To some extent. So we're developing the shift work product right now. And shift work's a little bit of a different problem. It's the same underlying disorder because you shift your light dark cycle. But often with jet lag, you go to a destination, you stay there for a while, then you come back. So you have the time to adapt, usually, unless you're on a very sort of a quick business trip. Shift work is more changeable, usually. So you might do 3 nights in a row, then 3 days, then 2 days off, then 1 night, etc., etc. People can often have very changeable hours. And so the goal won't be to fully adapt everyone to every night shift, because you can't do that, and anyone who claims they can do that is really not telling the truth. But what we're doing is shifting you in an appropriate direction for an appropriate amount to minimize shift work symptoms, while then providing other interventions to help you manage the symptoms like sleepiness and like any sort of insomnia. And so much like with jet lag, we're adapting you where we can, but if we can't fully adapt you, then we're giving you the tools to manage the sleepiness or the insomnia and reduce the impact of shift work for things like accidents and injuries and performance problems. So no, you can't shift 12 hours in a day. I can't send you from a day shift to a night shift and fully adapt your clock in a single day. No one can do that. But over time, we will shift you and also manage the symptoms to try and minimize the negative impacts of shift work.
Great, great. This question is from Corrado. He's saying, Corrado Ruiz is, how much time does it take to collect the data pattern that will reveal your chronotype? And how many days of data show casing natural sleep versus awake patterns? To that note, he says, I imagine it's a pain when people go to bed and get up by the clock.
Okay, just looking at that, yeah. So your chronotype, as I said, could really just be a questionnaire. So we ask you at the start of the app what your chronotype is, whether you're an evening, morning, or neither, and that's enough really for this type of real-world application. And so then when we ask your sleep patterns, we ask you what you typically want to do in terms of sleep. We ask you your duration, we ask you the timing, and then we structure the advice around your preference. So it's no good me saying to you, go to bed at 9 p.m. and wake up at 3 a.m. if that's not what you're going to do. There's no point me giving you advice you can't follow. So I ask you in the app, what do you want to do? And you'll tell me, well, I want to go to bed at midnight and wake up at 7. And so we take that structure and put all the other information around that so you can stick to it. Otherwise, there's no point. And there are, again, limitations, as we talked about, for the practicality filter. The science might say, wake up at 3 a.m. and see as much light as you can. But that's not going to help you if you've got a business meeting that morning or you've had a late dinner the night before. And so our advice, again, is structured around the practicalities of your sleep pattern and your chronotype so that you can do it. And we find this is really an important part. And this was honed over many years working with NASA, where I've been an advisor to NASA for when astronauts travel across the globe to go to Moscow or Cologne or Tokyo to train from Houston. And they need to hit the ground running, on day one. Their training schedules are packed. And so over the years, we've honed this if you like, this practicality filter, where we make sure that you can do what we ask you to do. Otherwise, there's no point in providing the advice. And so it's not really a pain to follow because you've told me what you want to do. So I'm not going to tell you to get up at 5 o'clock if you told me you want to get up at 7. It's going to tell you to get up at 7, but the advice is going to be planned around that preference to wake up at 7 o'clock.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to go back to the questions, and then we reopen the Q&A in a bit. We have a little bit of time. This still is in our hands. In terms of this app and Timeshifter is very much of a wellness and well-being app, but really, Mikey, this is very much about health. So can you tell us a little bit more about the differences between a company that wants to work in a health space versus well-being and wellness?
Yeah, sure. I think number one, I think that as Steve alluded to a little bit earlier, that there are so many both misconceptions, but also so much noise in this area where you're really competing against incorrect advice or incorrect interventions, rather than head on with competitors that actually are trying to deploy and apply the science that we apply. But as it relates to performance, wellness, health, I think with circadian rhythms, and Steve, maybe you can add your own comments to this, I think you're really addressing all of it, right? You're addressing the enjoyment, the productivity aspect of it, which is great. You feel better, you have less family disruption, you can enjoy your
Mickey's frozen. I'll take over.
Jump in.
What Mickey's trying to say, I think, is that it encompasses both wellness and health, and both of those things are important, and both are affected by the clock. So the wellness I see as your day-to-day quality of life, your day-to-day living, and all of you, if you're jet lagged and sleepy, your interactions with people are poor quality. You're angry, you're irritable. We know that jet lag alters the quality of your interactions, the quality of life, your wellness on a day-to-day basis. And so your ability to interact with the world depends on the clock and all the things that the clock affects, like mood and sleep. But in the long term, we know that health is affected by your clock as well. So if you are chronically misaligned over many years, you do have an increased risk of many diseases. And so we know that from shift workers. So shift workers are, of course, as I explained, changing their cycles rapidly. They never really adapt fully to their work shifts. And we know that shift workers have a much higher risk of heart disease, of stroke, of hypertension, diabetes, depression, and hormone-dependent cancers. And that's because all of your metabolism, all of your systems are controlled by the clock to some extent. And so, for example, if you're active at night, you're elevating your heart rate much more than you would be in the daytime. The risk of heart attacks peaks in the early morning hours, for example. Your lung function is impaired at night. That's why people have a higher risk of nocturnal asthma as opposed to the daytime, because the clock controls your respiratory function. So if you try to do things at night all the time, when our brain is telling you to sleep at night and be awake in the day, then you're not as good at doing it, you're not as efficient. And one area where we do know a little bit more about this is metabolism. If you eat the same meal at 1:30 in the morning as opposed to 1:30 in the afternoon, the same food, you will have higher insulin, higher glucose, higher fats in the bloodstream after the 1:30 a.m. meal, just because we have not evolved to eat at night as diurnal humans. So imagine you're a shift worker who's eating at the wrong time for decades. You're elevating your fat levels, elevating glucose. This is, of course, going to increase the risk of heart disease and diabetes. And so, but we're all a little bit jet lagged every day, as Alison asked in her question. And so in order to try and build good long-term health from a circadian point of view, stability and regularity is key. The clock has evolved to the timing of the sun, which sort of by definition is clockwork. It changes very little from day to day. The more stability we can have in our sleep-wake, our light-dark, our eating, our exercise, the better the clock will be, and those internal functions will then be more aligned. And so stability is really important. And in one of the questions I just saw briefly, I think Rachel asked about amount of sleep versus the timing. There is a payoff there. We want you to get enough sleep, and the recommendation is at least 7 hours every night for adults, but I think it should be a little more. But stability is key. It's no good getting 7 hours a night if you're wobbling your clock all over the place. You'd probably better, again, a little less sleep, but keeping it stable every night. And so you're going to find, as we find it easier to measure the clock, that variability is going to become a problem and stability is going to be healthier. So try and keep to the same schedule for sleep, for food, for exercise. Let the clock find its place, and then everything that the clock controls will come into line. And that's pretty much everything. And that's why we think it'll be important, because the clock really underpins everything we do.
And Lockley, maybe you can address the question that I think a lot of people have, which is the weekend gets in the way of that stability, right? So now you're up late Friday and Saturday night, and you sleep in Saturday and Sunday, and suddenly Sunday night you can't fall asleep early and get ready for work Monday. Yeah,
it's a problem. So we think for some reason that we can sort of binge on sleep loss in the week. And then sleeping at the weekends and think we're recovered, but that's really a myth. You're not very well recovered when we measure your performance. You think you are, in fact, because your subjective sleepiness is often misleading. A little like a drunk brain, a sleepy brain can't tell how badly it's doing, so you can't really rely on your own self-assessment. And think about that in the same way that you would about exercise and nutrition. If you ate pizza Monday to Friday but ate salads at the weekend, you wouldn't think you were doing yourself any good in terms of diet. The same is true of sleep. You can't sleep 5 hours a night from Monday to Friday and then try and catch up at the weekends and think that's doing you any good. It's not. It's about each and every day having the right amount of sleep, the right exercise, the right nutrition. It's a lifestyle change, and it's really about prioritizing sleep. And people think, well, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, you will sooner. If you don't sleep well. And it's probably more important than diet and exercise because it affects everything in a way that we don't really yet understand. And so it's about changing the lifestyle, protecting that time for sleep, keeping it regular, try to do the same at weekends and weekdays. The odd nap now and again is okay to catch up, but it shouldn't be 5 hours a night in the week and then 10 hours in bed on the weekends. That's not really going to do any good. Just like that occasional salad.
And so if you happen to go out and you're getting to bed a little later, keeping on your normal standard wake up time would benefit you, although you're not getting as much sleep as you should get that night.
For one night, yes. But if that becomes a pattern, then you need to adjust the pattern to that later time. And we could get into all sorts of debates here now about school start times and how that how society affects children's sleep in the same sort of way. There's a quick plug. I have a small book published a number of years ago called A Very Short Introduction to Sleep. It's $11.95 from Amazon and all good bookstores. But it's inexpensive. It's a general interest book around sleep, and we cover quite a lot of topics around sleep and society in there. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about the sleep specifically, then I would recommend finding that. It's even cheaper on Kindle, I think. But sleep is key, and sleep is part of jet lag, but it really is about the clock, not just the sleep. Sleep is one of the things the clock controls.
Thank you for the good segue into my next question, that is, Mickey, how your app integrates into the sleep tech ecosystem.
Yeah, so right now, as you know, I can even share. Let me just share another slide so it becomes a little bit more visual for people. Here you see the app and the data that we asked, the information we asked people about when they first downloaded the sleep pattern, the chronotype, some personal preferences, including if you want to use melatonin or not, and if you going to use caffeine or not, and then your itinerary information. And based on that, you're getting this plan that gives you all this information. Is it possible to integrate with other devices and other apps? Absolutely. So at this point, the app is self-contained, but the plan and conversations are around integration so that we can make the service even better, and also provide to the users what they are asking for, which might be some data they can use in other contexts. So yeah, I think knowing more about the when are people actually going to sleep, when are they getting up in the morning, for example. That's a piece of information that we ask people about that today. But if we had access to a sleep monitor, we'd know it exactly where the circadian clock is supposed to be at that time, or a little bit better, at least based on the answer you gave us when you downloaded the app. So there, I think that it's rare to see technologies in the wellness and health space that stand alone wouldn't be better if it connected in some way to other opportunities. That's just my view. You might solve one problem pretty well, but how wonderful would it be if that person using the app could also benefit in other ways? I think that's the real question.
Mm-hmm. Just one announcement, and then I continue. I have another question for you that segues especially with this. We want to use 5-10 extra minutes because we think the conversation is very, very interesting. So every one of you is welcome to stay for longer. Mickey, how strategic is to grow your business through partnerships? Now, we have a large community of entrepreneurs here, and they're all willing to understand also the dynamics of your business growth.
Yeah, no, I think, listen, the first thing that where we were to a large extent lucky, which is not something that's in our control, is now we talk about timing of light. Well, the timing of starting a business is as important as light is for dealing with jet lag. Sleep has come to a point where I think most individuals, employers, insurers, the travel industry has realized and recognized that sleep is really important for us. And like Dr. Lockley mentioned, it's more important than we even understand today. Like there's more things that will evolve and be discovered over the next years where it will be even more evident to and more important to manage your sleep, get enough good quality sleep, and be consistent with your circadian rhythm. But when it comes to the interest in sleep, in addition to the entire travel industry being interested in improving the travel experience, right? You have all these people that love to travel for vacations, that are interested in jobs that offer them travel opportunities. I know that the coronavirus and COVID-19 sort of got in the way, but in a while, there will be people, again, looking forward to their trips, whether it's business or pleasure. But the travel experience is a problem and is really bothersome for many, no matter how much you love to travel. And so I think with all those underlying movements and trends, we were lucky to launch Timeshifter in June 2018 when we launched it. People simply looked at, they understood the pain point. They had struggled with jet lag for many years. Many of our users are people that have traveled from US, for example, to China for 20 years and have struggled with jet lag for all those years. And then they try this tool and it changes their lives completely. And that's very exciting. But that has helped us to really create this pool where, although we're not helping people with sleep, but more the circadian misalignment and more quickly resetting to that new time zone, it certainly is the same benefits in the end, more alertness and energy during the day and naturally tired at night. And so I think that was really the most important aspect of the success we've experienced so far is timing. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I think that, you know, of course, now I'm going to try to answer your question rather than getting around, but, you know, it's wonderful when you have people come together like Dr. Lockley with his scientific background that are able to cut through the noise of all the misconceptions, all the various things that we've been told for so many years that are completely wrong and without no connection to science. And then you have, you know, people from the technology world and, you know, marketeers and others that understands that part of it and can create and build user experiences that are intuitive and friendly and educational. And then you end up with a great product. Then the question, and that's really your, you know, to answer your real question, which is, well, partnerships and how do you get it out there to millions of people that could benefit from your product and that are interested in the benefits. So there's the business to consumer way, or there's the business to business way. I think we're sort of what we would call a B2B2C. You know, we're going the business way where we are helping companies with many traveling employees offer Timeshifter as a benefit to their traveling employees, but also working through channel partners. We announced a partnership with United Airlines in November last year. And here in February, just before COVID-19 broke out more broadly, we announced a partnership with CWT, or formerly known as Carlsen Wagon Lead Travel, that are booking tickets for many of the largest companies in the world. And so those partnerships are helping us to get out there in front of more people that have the problem that we, you know, and get both the product, but also the education in front of them more quickly. It's wonderful when you work through a company, then you also have the company's platform to educate their employees, both about jet lag and beyond, right? So some of the topics we've talked about here today, my hope is that the app is not only helping people with jet lag, but also making them think, after they've used it and benefited from it, think, wow, light is so powerful. What do I do day to day that could improve my life, you know, in a more substantial way? Not just when I travel. And so, but anyway, I think the partnerships are important for us because it gives us a platform. With United, we're in front of millions of their travelers. With CWT, we come through their business customers and can educate everybody. And it's, for a startup, it's also a cheaper way to get out there and educate people rather than having to spend millions of dollars in advertising and in ads. So I'm not saying it's because of that. You know, that's just a matter of raising enough funds to go with one model versus the other. But we see with Timeshifter, it has been a great model for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Partners.
There is a question by David that I'd like to also complement with a market-related connotation. So he's asking, what about the quality of light, about the brightness and wavelength and UV compared to tungsten? And I'd like to say and ask you, could you tell us a bit more about the market of light that is emerging in response to circadian rhythm problems or to circadian rhythm health?
Yes, so there's a lot to know about light, in fact, and a lot recently discovered about light, but the quick answer is that the light which is most effective for shifting the clock is blue enriched short wavelength visible light. It's not UV, so UV light is important for other reasons like vitamin D synthesis, but UV light is not affecting the clock. So it's visible light and short wavelength blue looking light, which peaks at around 480 nanometers. For those of you who remember the physics in the spectrum, the peak sensitivity is 480 nanometers. And the reason for this is that remarkably about 20 years ago, the field discovered a brand new photoreceptor in the eye, different from the rods and cones we used to see. And so we know that the rods are sensitive to dim light. We know that the short, medium, and long wavelength cones are sensitive to blue, green, and red light to help us see color. But there's a new photopigment, a new molecule that detects light, which is called melanopsin, which is nicely confusing with melatonin, but they're not the same. Melanopsin, and melanopsin is most sensitive to 480 nanometer blue light. So this is why you're seeing companies now produce lights that either upregulate the blue content in that white light to help with alertness, to help with shifting the clock. But then in the evening before sleep, we have to dim the light and reduce the blue content to make us sleepy and to stop alerting the brain. And so we have some relationships with some of those lighting companies. And for example, our API, the Timeshifter API, can drive lighting products if we wanted to, for example, have the app automatically change the lights in a hotel or on a plane. Our app can do that. And so our ability to connect, for example, with light and make sure you're seeing the right light at the right time, is another added partnership that we're working on bringing to market. So light is key, the right light is key, but it's not just about the right intensity and spectrum, but also the right timing. And that's where the circadian element really comes into play. And so just like with anything, there are people selling snake oil around light. There are people selling real science. I can't make recommendations of lighting products, but certainly there are ways to start to try and differentiate on those companies and really look out for that 480 nanometer focus. You want more of the 480 nanometer blue light for daytime and for shifting, and less of it prior to sleep.
Thank you. We are officially in the Q&A, so let's try and be shorter if we can, although the questions are so interesting. Peter Savage is asking, what are your thoughts on ultradian rhythm?
Yeah, so ultradian rhythms are rhythms which are less than 24 hours, and they do exist. For example, we have about a 90-minute sleep cycle in the brain. When we sleep, we go through these 90-minute cycles. And there are other things which have this less than 24-hour pattern. There's not much known, though, about how that really is controlled and regulated in humans and what impact that has to health. We commonly would see it in babies who haven't yet developed their circadian system, who might be on a 3 or 4 hour feeding cycle, for example. That's an ultradian rhythm, but it's really driven by homeostatic progresses, hunger, rather than an internal clock. And so there are those rhythms, but we don't really know how to measure them or how to use them practically for people, unfortunately.
Thank you. Andrea was asking earlier if anything about the people who suffer insomnia.
Yes, so insomnia is, it can be two things. Insomnia can be a clinical disorder that you become diagnosed with, and there are a number of different reasons for insomnia. Or it can really be a temporary symptom that you might just have, for example, when you travel with jet lag. You might have insomnia because you can't sleep in Japan, but we know why. It's not an organic disorder. We just know you're sleeping at the wrong time. And so if you have a clinical expression of insomnia, that does need to be treated by a sleep physician. But recently there's been quite a lot of advances made in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. There are a number of online courses available. We seem to have good success and seem to persist a lot longer than, for example, just treating with a medication. And so there are many reasons for insomnia. Some of them are environmental and can be treated by fixing the environment and the conditioning that sometimes causes people to have insomnia. But sometimes there are other disorders which need more closer medical evaluation. So if you do have insomnia or suspect you do, you should see a sleep physician. There are many American Academy of Sleep Medicine board certified sleep physicians. But for insomnia without, if you wanted to try and look at things to help with sleep hygiene and sleep practices, some of the cognitive behavioral therapy tools for insomnia seem to be quite successful.
Thank you. Mickey, not on the chat, how hard is it to launch a company in this space?
In this space, generally, I would say it's very hard. Now, defining the space beyond jet lag, but really looking more to, health, wellness, performance, I think is very difficult. Not only to create a product that actually delivers on its promise is difficult, but also to launch it and cut through the noise. I think we've been fortunate that our company is surrounded by astronauts, former astronauts from NASA. Dr. Stephen Lockley has been helpful and both educational and sort of, helping us develop the product. And we have other amazing people around us, athletes. The chairman of Air Canada is an investor in the company. And so through those affiliations combined with the scientific proof, where we can refer people to scientific studies, high quality scientific studies that we have not created ourselves. Well, I guess Dr. Lockley has created some of them, but also to other scientists out there that have done a lot of work over the years to get to that proof. And then what we're doing is we are proving the apps, or validating the app's effectiveness through data, right? So I can give you a couple of pieces of data right now that will give us much more airtime in the media and with companies and give us meetings. And one of them is, at this point, I think we have almost 80,000 post-travel surveys completed, where our travelers are giving us two pieces of information after a completed trip. One piece is, how much did you follow the jet lag plan? And the second piece is, how much jet lag did you experience? And based on that data, again, almost 80,000 of those questionnaires, so it's a substantial amount, only 3.61% are struggling with severe, very severe jet lag, which is a very small number compared to other surveys done in the past out there, where more than 90% say they struggle with jet lag on long-haul flights, etc. And then our own data also shows that of the people, if you don't follow the plan to a large extent, then 17 times more people are struggling with very severe jet lag versus the people that follow the plan. So I think any startup or any company in our space would be smart if they, number one, had their affiliations done in advance, so that they had this scientific credibility, but also quickly prove that their solution is in fact working and helping, and not just share a few scientific papers that, again, on paper in a sleep setting and in a sleep lab and other places can be can give you indications, but the product itself, can an app deliver on the science promise? That's a question, right?
Yep.
If the app is not user-friendly, if you didn't have the practicality filters, if you didn't educate people quickly and efficiently, you might not get the same results. So I think it's tough to cut through the noise in our space, but it can be done if the experience is good, if it has the scientific proof, and you continue to back it up with more and more data.
Thank you. For either of you, biodata ethics, what kind of biometrics do you collect, and what's your take on it?
Well, I mean, are you talking about data in general?
Well, data that are regarding your life. So biodata that are so important to getting to know people's real blueprints, so to speak.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, we have to collect certain data to provide that personalized plan that people need in order for them to solve jet lag. But we are only providing aggregated data to third parties, right? So our partners, including, for example, United Airlines or CWT, are never getting any personally identifiable information about anyone. It's just not in our DNA. Privacy is more important now than ever. I know that many in the younger generation don't care about their privacy as much as I do, and people may be a little bit different generations, but from our standpoint, it has to be a user-driven event. If somebody wants to share data because it can benefit them in different ways, those options might open up in the future. But right now, the only data that we share are aggregated data with nothing connected to the person's identity. But the way we do use the data ourselves, again with no personally identifiable data as part of that data set, is to improve the algorithm, is to improve the experience. So again, based on certain factors like chronotypes or routes or number of time zones shifted whatever way, east, west, that data we can use to say, well, here we get a response from a lot of people that it's not as effective as we would like to see it be. So let's look at that route and see how we can tweak the algorithm to work better. So that's the way we use it. We're not selling people's data for advertising purposes or something else. Would never do it.
Thank you. To be respectful of your time, I want to ask you, I still have a few questions that I think are super interesting to add to the conversation. Are you agreeable to spend 5 to 10 extra minutes with us?
Yep, yeah, I can. And what I thought, I've saved the chats as well. So I don't know whether people can write to me separately. If we don't get to the question, I'm happy to answer some of those, or I can provide my email at the end in the chat and people can write to me. So
right.
Happy
to. Well, in such case, I'd like to ask for everybody's benefit this interesting question by Rick Leander. Is there any difference in the way people who are totally blind from birth respond versus people who lose their sight after in life?
Yeah, we don't think so. So that is a great question. And we've tried to look at that in our studies. And I've studied literally hundreds of totally blind people to try and work out the impact of different types of blindness, the duration of blindness, whether they're blind from birth or acquired blindness later in life. It doesn't seem to matter because the only way to get that light information to the brain is through the eyes. And even if you were not born with that capability, there isn't really something that replaces it because there's nothing else in the environment which gives you that same strong signal as the light-dark cycle. Now, in other species such as birds and reptiles, the light can go through the brain, through the skull. And so, in fact, a bird or a lizard wouldn't have the same problem because the light could still get in and hit the clock going through the brain, through the skin and skull. But in mammals, we specialized that function to the eyes. So it is only through the eyes that we see light, and it doesn't really seem to matter. But if you have even the tiniest amount of light perception, that still seems to be enough to reset the clock. And so there's a separation of visual and non-visual effects of light, as we call it, even though you don't have enough light perception to see. If your eyes can detect light and it gets into the brain, then that seems to be enough light to tell the brain whether it's night or day from a circadian point of view. So these new cells function differently from our sight. It's really just about telling the brain, is it night or day, and then by extension, winter or summer, because we also use light to detect seasonal changes as well. It's an older system than vision in terms of our biology. But no, it doesn't make a difference, we think, if you're blind from birth or acquire it later in life. Great,
thank you. Steve K is asking if there is any tips on determining what someone's ideal sleep duration is.
Yeah, that's a great question. A colleague of mine did that experiment, but I'm not sure you're going to be able to do it yourself. So the way my colleague found out is he asked people to go to bed at 4 p.m. for 16 hours for 11 nights in a row. And so what happens if you give yourself a huge sleep opportunity each and every night, you pay off some of the sleep debt and you reach your asymptote, you reach your sleep need, if you like. And so for the first few nights, people were sleeping for 12, 13, 14 hours, then 10, then 9. And on average, they found that young people from 18 to 30 slept about 8.5 hours on average. And older people over 65, if they were given 12 hours at night and 4 hours in the day, slept about 7.5 hours on average. And so the only way for you to really know what your internal sleep need is to give yourself the chance to sleep as much as possible. So maybe on your next vacation, you go to bed for 12 hours a night for a week and see by the end of the week how much sleep you actually had on that 7th night when you've paid off some of that sleep debt. But you, of course, know a little bit yourself how well you feel. you know if you can function well on 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 hours. So you've got some idea already. If you're not going to work it out, then the quick answer is you're not sleeping enough. None of us are sleeping enough compared to our biological need. So give yourself more time in bed and see if you fill that time. And if you do, then you need it. So prioritize sleep. Give yourself maybe 9 hours in bed at night for a week or two, and see where you end up, and hopefully see how much better you feel if you sleep longer, and then give you the incentive to stick to that.
Thank you. A question for either of you, and I think this is really wrapping up because this is very current for the times we're in. So Alison is asking that you, of course, mentioned how circadian rhythm plays a significant role in our immune function. What does this mean for us during the current times when our immune health is especially a priority? For instance, talking about vaccine efficacy.
Right. So there's a couple of things there. Obviously, it's a big and current topic. So on a simple level, the immune system is under the control of the clock, just like your lungs and heart and brain and other systems. And so stability in your circadian system will help, if you like, strengthen or bolster the rhythms in your immune system. And so we are going to be more susceptible to infections at certain times of day, more likely at night compared to the daytime. So having the stability of good light, dark, good sleep, wake, daytime eating, daytime exercise, all of those things are going to keep our clock aligned and will bolster the rhythms of all of our functions, not just immune function, will affect all elements that the clock controls. In terms of a vaccine, there are no studies that have directly tested this around circadian rhythms yet, but there is a very good study that was published from the University of Chicago around the flu vaccine and sleep. And very quickly, two groups were given a flu vaccine, and then the titer was measured, the amount of response, the amount of antibody in the bloodstream was measured 10 days later. And in one group, they were only given 4 hours of sleep for 5 days. And in the other group, they were given as much sleep as they liked for those 5 days. Those who had less sleep when they were vaccinated had 50% less titer in their bloodstream 10 days later. 3 weeks later, the two groups were the same. So eventually, the vaccine had the same effectiveness, but in the short term, the vaccine was less effective when it was given to people who had sleep loss, meaning that your short-term risk is going to be higher. And if you were vaccinating now, you'd be at more risk of getting the flu in this case for 2 or 3 weeks after, compared to the group who slept more. And so this hasn't been brought into clinical practice really, although it should be. But before you get a vaccine, you should sleep as much as possible for as many days as possible before, to give your vaccine the best chance of having an effective response. The same would be true of stability. And so as we start to maybe increase, we start to have COVID vaccines, it wouldn't do you any harm to sleep as long as possible for as many days before getting it, to give yourself the best chance, even though that's not been proven for the COVID vaccine when it comes out, but it's certainly been shown for the standard flu vaccine. The time of day, we can't answer that. We could theorize on when the best time would be, but that would really be speculation at this time. Good sleep, go into your vaccination well rested.
Thank you very much.
We actually did a little white paper on the immune function and the circadian rhythms. So if anybody is interested, I'll put my email right here in the chat. So I'm happy to send a little PDF with some references. I think one or two of the things you talked about there, Lockley, is part of that mini white paper. But if anybody wants that, just send me an email.
Wonderful, wonderful. I have a very last question. Every good business starts with a problem that's mostly a personal problem. So I was wondering, was yours or Steve's a personal problem that of a jet lag? Well, that brought you to the idea that you should start a company around it?
Well, my childhood, I basically grew up on a plane. My mom flew for Scandinavian Airlines for 45 years. So as a kid, I traveled all over the world to the US. I lived in Denmark. I'm from Denmark, and lived in Asia as well. And my whole life has been, impacted by travel, and jet lag, yes, has been a problem. More so later in life, like, so, you know, now I'm 45, I believe, 44, 45.
Jet lag, plus or minus.
In the 20s, I mean, everyone, even if people say they don't have jet lag, they have jet lag. The circadian clock is not in sync with the destination time zone, even if people feel better than others. Jet lag is just something that has to take its course and has some different implications for different people. But for me in the 20s, I didn't feel as jet lagged as I did turning, you know, 35, say, and onwards. And it has been a real problem for me when traveling around. So yes, you're absolutely right. One of the reasons for starting with jet lag is maybe there's certainly some business consideration, but also because it's really fun to create a product where you yourself need it, and it's easier to develop that way. I completely agree. So yes, there is a connection.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us tonight. This has been a wonderful process of co-creation and wonderful knowledge sharing. Thanks again. And thank you everyone for tuning in from different time zones and perhaps experiencing some jet lags here and there. We will never know. Until soon. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.